Tom Reeder, 1665 North Buck Creek Road, Casper, Wyoming. I guess I'm kind of here tonight. We're in two halves as far as owning property and as far as the legislator. You know, I heard Mr. Knight speak the other night at the Planning Commission, said he couldn't explain maybe the Teton case that just happened in June the 24th, and just really couldn't explain what's going on. So I spent most of today just looking up Wyoming Supreme Court cases. The one in Teton County Commissioners, you know, against the gravel people, as far as, and Commissioner Bell brought up as far as, you know, do we limit those cars to 10 acres now? Stuff like that. Well, there the Teton County tried to limit the gravel pit to 3 acres and only producing 16,000 pounds a year, or 16,000 tons a year of gravel, based on the new zoning regulations. The Supreme Court, of course, did not allow that. They said they could go up to the property, into their property, but they had to go by the EQA rules as far as coming back 300 feet because of mining for gravel. But they had full use of that property. What I'm hoping to do is I went through all those cases and I tried to write down almost word for word what all three of them said the same. And it had to do with exactly what we're talking about tonight. So really, we can begin by just noting that Title 18, Chapter 5 of the Wyoming Code contains the statutes that grant counties planning and zoning authority and prescribe limits of that authority. In this present case, this proposal, we only need to focus on Article 2, and specifically 18.5201 and 18.5207. It is also important to note that counties have no sovereignty independent from that of the state, and the only power available to them is the power that has been delegated to them by the state. Thus, a county's authority to adopt a zoning ordinance is limited by state statute. And the general grant of power to counties to adopt zoning laws in the interest of public welfare does not permit the local governing bodies to override the state law and the policies supporting it. If an ordinance conflicts with a state statute, then the ordinance is void. And that's right from the Supreme Court. We recognize that 18.5201 permits counties to regulate and restrict land uses in the unincorporated areas of the county. This zoning authority has limits. One limit is that this authority must be exercised in a manner that promotes the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the county. Furthermore, when a county issues a resolution pursuant to those ends, it must be reasonable means to implement the regulation. Now in section 18.5207, it contains another significant limitation which contains some ambiguity. The first sentence reads, a zoning resolution enacted under the provision of Wyoming Statute 18.5201 through 206 shall not prohibit the continuance of the use of any land, building, or structure for the purpose for which the land, building, or structure is used at the time the resolution is adopted, and it is not necessary to secure any certificate permitting for such continuance. While 18.5201 grants counties general zoning authority, 18.5207 circumscribes that ability by permitting the continuance of usage that predate the adoption of a legal zoning resolution. It also examined this limitation as a non-conforming use exemption and or a grandfather exception. Now the Supreme Court defines a non-conforming use as a use which, although it does not conform with existing zoning regulations, it did exist lawfully prior to the enhancement enactment of the zoning regulations. These uses are permitted to continue, although technically in violation of the current zoning regulations, until they are abandoned. An exception of this kind is commonly referred to as the grandfather exception. This sentence of 18.5.207 recognizes the right to continue a non-conforming use is a vested property right. This is protected by both federal and state constitutions. Second sentence in 18.5.207 gives counties zoning authority over certain non-conforming uses by creating a permissive exception to the grandfather exception contained in the first sentence. The second sentence reads, however, the alteration or addition to any existing building or structure for the purpose of effecting any change or use may be regulated or prohibited by zoning resolution. Section 18.5.207 unambiguously gives counties authority to regulate or prohibit alterations or additions to grandfathered buildings or structures when the alterations or additions creates a change in the use of the grandfathered building or structure. It says nothing about changes in use of grandfathered lands. I would just say that I really believe, in this proposal you give a definition of non-conforming grandfathered. Well, you just heard the definition by the Supreme Court after reading the two statutes, so I'm hoping we're all in agreement where that's sitting. I believe that this proposal is in direct opposite of what the statute and what the law, what the legislature has written, what the justices have upheld, and I really would advise that you withdraw this proposal and just stay with the way we are right now, because I think this will be against the statutes and it will become null and void immediately. I would stand for any questions.
Commissioner McDowell.
Representative Reader, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
For your input. Let me take you way out there, way out, what if? What if I'm a rancher with 30,000 acres of land and I got 3 houses on it? And my land was zoned ranching, agricultural, mining, which majority of it was in 1980, but I had 3 houses. Does the natural expansion doctrine suggest that I can then build houses, not have to subdivide, or not have to commit to the state statute of 40-acre minimum on rural developments? Understand the question? There are simpler issues available to us. The Jones issue is an issue that is driving this. Somebody gets up, I'll talk about Grant Street Grocery, which in my mind is even a simpler issue. But the reality is non-conforming uses are, in the rural areas, are significant and extensive, and can you expand? Should we not be able to say, should the state not be able to say, I'm sorry, you can't build houses on 25-acre lots?
Is it against the law right now that they can't build those houses?
In rural developments, for subdivision purposes, you have to subdivide at 40 acres, I think, by state law. That was a change.
And if you're going to live in all those houses, I guess you could build as many as you wanted. But if you went to rent them out or to sell them or something like that, now all of a sudden you're in non-conforming, and you're changing the use, then I think you would be in a little bit of trouble.
Thank you. You said that if you were going to rent them out, you might be in a little trouble.
sell them.
If you have houses built on a ranch and you provide housing for your employee, theoretically, they're supposed to turn that in as income because it's worth so much a month if you provide the house. Is that renting it out? Or is that a ranch business?
I would say that's a business, part of their business. And the more hands and the more ranches that you can get, if you're expanding, you should be able to build more ranch houses, more cattle. Yeah. I think that's your right.
Any other questions for Mr. Weaver?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your research.